Good evening, YouTube. Finally, we're here. This channel is long overdue. Welcome to Sober Ed. I'm a recovered alcoholic with 1,691 days sober under my belt, and that's not through any doing of mine. It's through surrendering to a higher power that I've grown to know and to love as God. I set this channel up a couple of years ago with these intentions, and I'll be really honest with you. I set the channel up with the intentions of becoming a viral sort of influencer, if you like, and that it would bring me fame and fortune and recognition. And through the spiritual work that I've done, I've identified that forms of social media, forms of sharing, forms of putting ourselves out there in the public eye can be seen as doing it for personal gain and for glorification. Now, I've launched this video today, and some may say this is still personal gain and glorification towards me and not towards the power that saved me and got me well. But I can sit in front of this camera today honestly and say to you that the intentions of my heart are to help other people. And if years down the line this channel generates an income, generates a following, generates anything like that, if that happens, then anything sort of earned through it, or any gifts that come through it, be it financial, be it connections to other people, then I will give my first and best of all of that to the organisations that helped get me well first. So I want to make that abundantly clear before we set off. This is not to glorify me, and this is not to make any sort of personal gain or profit. The other thing that prevented me from sort of speaking publicly is fear of abuse, basically. Fear of people jumping on board and commenting and slagging it down and this, that and other, and just have a quick slap. Yeah, so there were an element of fear, but I've outgrown that now through working with people and working with myself and other people to overcome these sort of fears. So yeah, Sober Ed is a channel that I hope will go on to help people suffering in addiction, but not only the people suffering in addiction. I want to try and help the families and the family members of alcoholics and of drug addicts, because there is a need for support for all those people that are connected to anybody that's caught in alcoholism. So I think the first video that will go onto this page has to be, and rightly has to be, the story of how I became an alcoholic and how I now live a free life from being in bondage to alcohol and drugs. I identify primarily as an alcoholic, but in alcohol I would consume everything from Class A drugs to prescribed medications. I was chasing highs constantly, and it led me to a path that led me to destruction. So the easiest way and the best way to start this is to start from my experience as an alcoholic, as a drinker early in life, and I want to talk about the road that led me to the point where I broke, to the point where I broke free. So if you want to stick around, and my hope is that somebody somewhere gets something from it. And a motto of mine is just one more life. If we can catch one more life, just that next alcoholic who might have died in the alcoholic pit, or that next drug addict that might have died on the back of a bus with a needle in his arm or her arm. if we can just save that one more life, then it will worth it, do you know? So, my drinking career, what were it like? How were it? Well, I were quite a sensible lad growing up. I'd like to say I were a sensible lad. I don't mean that disrespectfully to anybody else that maybe weren't as sensible as I were, but I always seemed to be not in relationships, but I had a girlfriend from the ages of like 14 to 18. I think I had a girlfriend, so that sort of, in a weird sort of way, that slowed down the progression of the illness that I've got. But nevertheless, I want to go back to being a boy, back to being a kid. And I remember vividly in my memory that we used to play, there were me and a group of my friends, we used to play football down a local garage. We'd play wally, you had to kick the ball, it would bounce off a wall, you had one kick to kick it back, and then they had to kick it back, and it was a brilliant game. We'd play it topless, sweating our nuts off, and we enjoyed it. And I'll never forget this one night, one of the older guys came round with a bottle of White Lightning, bottle of cider, but cider that had never ever seen an apple. Do you know, it was that sort of white cider that were rancid, 7.5%. And we all got involved in it. We all had a couple of sips and looking back now from where I am, I can see that my experience at that time in life were completely different to the experiences of other people, but everybody's experience that night were totally different. We had a couple of lads that were running around like absolute lunatics trying to get on garage roof and maybe break in. We were tearaways a little bit. We had a couple of guys that were trying to hit on other girls and sort of make moves there. We had one of lads that were just rolling around on the floor and couldn't really speak. And I remember sitting in grass and experiencing this sort of instant silencing of a very noisy mind. And I'm a young lad at this point, you know, I'm drinking. My mum and dad don't know I'm drinking. My brother and sister don't know I'm drinking. It was just one of those sort of things that comes along in life, and it happened. And I remember laying in this long grass and looking up at the sky and just thinking, wow, this feels amazing. And I went home that night and I was due to have a karate lesson, and my dad smelt the drink on me, and he gave me a good telling off, and I missed the lesson, and I had the hard word about drink. And I didn't really have any more incidents with alcohol until I started to hit my late teens. And there were a few occasions where my dad would catch me walking up road with a bag of alcohol before we got on a local bit of woodland where we used to go drinking and playing on tree swings and making dens and stuff like that, you know. We weren't bad lads, we were just out to have a good time, and we were out to explore alcohol. There were no real drugs involved. I'd done a little bit of weed while I was younger, but never really sort of stuck with that. It wasn't for me. It amplified the mess up here, if that made sense, even from a young age. And I remember that the first night I sort of got absolutely paralytic, spewed up, and I remember thinking I will never ever drink again, like we all, many of us, many times did. But I had a relatively, I mean, people in my family might disagree, I drank heavy at times, but I had a relatively safe and sensible and normal, whatever that is, whatever normal is, I had a relatively normal relationship with alcohol from the ages of 16 to sort of 20, and no real major issues other than the fact that I could drink quite a bit when I got going, and I suppose certain people around me would have thought, yeah, he's a heavy drinker, and they would have been right in what they said, but I still had the ability to stop it, you know. I still had the ability to work Monday to Friday and to come home and then have a drink on a weekend or sit out in a garden. It was a healthy relationship with alcohol, and I enjoyed it. And I remember meeting my next girlfriend at the age of about 18. No, 21. I was 21. and Sheila being about 18 years of age. And I remember when I got with her, I started to drink a little bit more, and I started to, not because I'd got with her, because she's not a drinker, but I did start to drink a little bit more. We'd spend nights round at her family's, and her family liked to have a drink, and I got involved in that culture of drinking, and they still like to have a drink today, and they remain sensible drunks. You know, they know when to stop, they have the off switch, they don't take it too far, there's no carnage or calamity that comes from the drinking. But I remember sort of getting to that point, and I started to drink a little bit more, but still nevertheless remained somewhat quite sensible. There were the odd occasion where I'd let myself down, I'd have a fallout with somebody, I'd walk away from a house party, I'd walk home, I'd bugger off somewhere. But nevertheless, I still remained to have a relatively sensible relationship with alcohol. Now, when I would about, I must have been about 24 years of age, I think 24, 25, when we had our first child, and we sort of got pregnant unexpectedly, and I remember all of a sudden going from being a young man living sort of carefree. I had a job, I lived at home with my parents. We'd had a lovely childhood. You know, we did a lot of travelling as kids. We went all over the country on holidays. There were always staycations. There were never abroad holidays, and we never felt a lacking. Do you know what I mean? I never felt like I was missing out anything there. But when I got to the age of 24, unexpectedly, my partner fell on, and we had to quickly find somewhere to live. And family members helped out, everybody rallied round us, we had people bringing us things from all over, and we got a little bungalow that had been lived in once before by my dear Nana, bless her, and we moved in there. And I distinctly remember when we moved into that bungalow, I thought, this is it now, I'm a man, I've got a dishwasher. Well, I didn't have a dishwasher, we had a washing machine and a fridge that I bought second hand. We had deck chairs in our living room, we had a CD rack, and we had a big back television that was very, very, very kindly given to us. And we had a bed that we could sleep on. But I remember thinking, that's my fridge and I'm going to fill it with beer, you know. And that's what I did. And I started to drink more and more often. I started to become probably what you'd say a regularly daily drinker. Do you know, it wouldn't have been uncommon for my partner to come home and find me drinking a few drinks on a Wednesday night, and it wasn't really frowned upon, and everything were all right. Now, at the age of, when my firstborn daughter turned 2, so I'll have been about 20, 25, maybe 26. She developed, she was looking really unwell. My partner said, I think we should take her into the doctors and have her checked because she's looking unwell. So we took her along to our local doctor, and the doctor said, at that time I was saying, she's fine, it's just middle of winter, she needs a bit of sunshine, she'll soon perk up, blah, blah, blah. She probably got a bit of cold. And my partner says, no, I've got like this mother's intuition, I want to get her checked, Teddy. And we did, we went down. And the doctor kind of agreed with me, but says we'll send her for some blood work doing just to rule anything out. Anyway, sent her for this blood work. I'm at work one day, I got this phone call off my partner who were in hysterics. She was crying her eyes out. She says, we've had a message from the doctor that says that Grace is showing signs of liver failure. And my life in that moment just came crashing down, came to a standstill. I rushed home, met up with Laura, my parents, her parents, everybody were upset, the children were upset, and we rushed Gracie off into hospital, and she started to have extensive blood work done in hospital right over Christmas. And I remember sitting down there absolutely petrified. I had a knot in my stomach and I could not think of anything but this knot in my stomach and how concerned I was for Gracie. And after a long wait down at hospital and lots of tests and lots of finger pricks in my little girl's finger, we were sent home because it was the Christmas period. The labs were shut down for Christmas, and they says you might as well go home and come back in a few days. We'll give you a ring. So we shut off home, and I remember driving home that night, and my partner said to me, she says, Eddie, we best pull over and get some food at McDonald's, because my daughter and my partner had not eaten. You know, they'd not eaten all day, and nor had I. And my partner had says, let's pull into McDonald's, let's get something to eat and we'll take it through home. And at that moment I thought to myself, in a situation like this, where our daughter might have liver failure or leukemia or cancer, how on earth can you be thinking about food? See, in a situation where I got very nervous or anxious, my throat would close up, I'd have a knot in my stomach, I'd feel sick, I couldn't physically consume food. But Laura says, no, pull in, we'll get food, and we both need to eat. So I did what I was told and pulled in, we got the food. I didn't get anything, we pulled up at home. And as my daughter and my partner sat at our little dining sort of desk kitchen table, they were eating away at the McDonald's, and I reached into the fridge and I put my hand on a bottle of lager. And as I turned round with a bottle opener, my partner looked at me and says, I can't believe you're having a drink in a moment like this, you know. At any given moment, we might need to rush our daughter back down to hospital and to get her checked out, and you're having a drink. And our thinking were different. Like, looking back now from where I am and where I've sort of grown to spiritually and mentally, at that moment in my life, I lacked the capacity to think about the needs that my daughter had and the needs that my partner had. See, all I could think about was the feeling inside me. And the only thing I knew that worked to silence that feeling was alcohol. See, Laura had the capacity to think about our daughter Gracie. She knew that she needed not only to nourish herself, she needed to nourish our daughter. But I couldn't think like that, you know. And this all very subtly crept up on me. The drinking problem is a progressive fatal illness. And that, I at one point I found, and I seriously found at that point while we were going through that ordeal with Gracie, who today is fit and well, I must say she's fit and well. It turned out to be a blood condition that we're treated with steroids, and she's a very happy, beautiful 14-year-old woman today that's she's an absolute gift to me. So everything were okay in the end. But nevertheless, I sort of figured out in and around that time that when I felt anxious, if I took a drink, it took the feeling away. So alcohol very quickly became my go-to medicine. I'd stopped drinking socially and started to drink for the feelings that were produced inside me, whether it be depression, whether it be anxiety, whether it be excitement, whether it be anything. I knew that alcohol would fix the feeling inside, that internal feeling. So sort of fast forwarding now, my children must have been, I think they were about 8 and 9 at the time. Yeah, that sort of ties in, or 9 and 10 at the time. That sort of ties into where I am with sobriety. 8 and 9 they were. I'd got to a point, these episodes of drinking to combat feelings internally were getting worse, you know. Like, I was coming home every day because, like, I woke up every single day sort of irritable. Every day I were irritable. You know, I'd wake up, I'd start my day, I'd be out the door, I'd be feeling sorry for myself, I'd be angry with other drivers on the way to work. And it wasn't until I got home, reached into the fridge, grabbed a can glug, 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 and then them feelings started to slowly dissolve. It were a magic elixir. It were a magic chemical that I poured into myself, and it instantly changed the way that I felt internally. And I remember I always thought I could control it. I always thought I would say things to myself, when it gets so bad, I'll stop. I remember thinking to myself, Eddie, you're an alcoholic. And I would always, this counter sort of thought, you can't be alcoholic, Eddie. You drive a car, you've got a job, you live in a house, you know. I had this image of an alcoholic as a guy on a park bench with a rope holding his trousers up, swearing at everybody that passed him and begging for money and brown bagging it out of a brown bag. But that's not necessarily the case. There are many alcoholics out there that are functioning, that are living what we would class or deem as society as very normal lives. They go to work, they come home from work, they drink, they solve the problem, they go back to work, they do it all again. And that's where I was, but I was starting to get to a point where the episodes of drinking were getting more and more severe. I was starting to drink to points where I was disappearing and isolating my family. I was disappearing and leaving my family in vulnerable positions. There were nights where we'd been out at a rugby presentation and all our family were there, and our daughter were getting a presentation for rugby, and I'd been drinking drink after drink after drink after drink, and it sort of got to closing time, and I knew that if the pub closed I couldn't get to more drink, and I left the pub and left my family and left everybody else inside, and I buggered off and I went in search of getting more alcohol to keep drinking all night long. And I had this problem that deep down inside me, I sensed that I could control it. There were periods of sobriety. I'd get sober for like a couple of weeks at a time, and that had sort of like that had encouraged my partner that he's not alcoholic, he can stop drinking. And then after a few weeks, I'd be manipulating her back into letting me have a drink. I'd be saying, look, obviously I don't have a drink problem because I don't drink today, and I can go a few days without having it, and alcoholics drink daily and blah blah blah, they don't stop drinking, do you know? So it carried on like that, but it got much, much darker, and that was the introduction of cocaine. That was when some friends and I been out, we were on a night out, and somebody had introduced me to cocaine, but I'd spent a couple of hours enjoying being in the company of these people and seeing how well they were all doing in life, and it was something that I wanted, and I wanted to be a part of this clique, and this substance came round and I jumped on it, and I experienced it for the first time, and it was quite a euphoric feeling of elation, excitement, intense energy. And yeah, when cocaine came involved, that's when sort of the train derailed, and I started to rapidly decline, and I continued to secretly use cocaine and drink heavily in and around my family for a few years. I would spend copious amounts of money on drugs. I would place our family in financial hardship in order to get drugs, and I would lie about it continuously. I'd be lying about finances. This has happened, that's happened, I've paid this, I've lost this, I'm missing that, I'm missing the other, I never got the money, blah blah blah, do you know? And somebody once said to me, Christ, Eddie, you can tell a lie when truth will do you, and it were true. Do you know, I there were no need for me to lie sometimes, but yet it came so freely to me. Do you know, it lived within me and just splurted out of me. And life started to get really, really bad. I've always had a good relationship with my children. Always had a good relationship with my children. But I'm not ashamed today to say something as shameful as what I'm about to say. But I placed alcohol and cocaine above the love, the need of my children. And I remember I remember towards the last 3 years of me drinking, from the age of 30 to 33 years of age, I remember I'd been on a big drink, a big binge the night before, Sunday night I think, into the Monday morning. And I remember my partner waking up and saying, "You stink, and I can see you powder up your nose and blah, blah, blah. And it's disgusting." And I laid there in bed in floods of tears, crying my eyes out, and my little girls came in. Do you know, my eldest? She came and laid on bed with me and she said, "Is everything okay, Daddy?" And I says, "No." And Mum shouted up from downstairs, she says, "Daddy's not well." And she couldn't have been any further. Do you know, she couldn't have been any nearer the truth, sorry, than what she said. She said, "Daddy's not well." And I didn't realise how unwell I was. And my little girls give me a kiss, bless them, and they said, "It'll be okay, Daddy, you'll get there, you'll get there. You'll feel better later. We'll see you after school." And I remember getting out of that bed and grabbing and clutching onto a bottle of vodka. And I walked over to the window and I peeked out. And I watched as my two girls got into my car and my wife got into a car. And I watched as my neighbour over at road loaded his car and waited for my partner to back out before he drove off, you know, courteous gentleman. And I remember thinking, why the fuck can't I do that? Why can I not get up on a daily basis and function like normal people? Whatever normal is, what is it? I don't know what it is. What these people are doing around me. They're getting up, they're waking up, they're getting in the cars, they're providing for the families. Do you know, the polite, the courteous. Why can't I be that person? Why am I full of hatred? Why am I lying continuously? Why am I putting drink and drugs and substances and behaviours above the needs of my partner and kids? And it ate me up inside. And a little bit later on that day, I was sat, as I started out, I was sat, and I had a picture of my two little girls, and I had a bag of cocaine in one hand. And I remember glugging this bottle of rum I've moved on to at this point. 10 o'clock in the morning, sat on my stairwell, nobody else in the house. And I'm sniffing this bag of cocaine. And I'm looking down at this picture of these beautiful, beautiful children. And I thought, why the fuck can't I love you enough to stop this stuff? And I felt completely powerless. I felt disgusted. I was absolutely full of self-pity and shame. And then the next day came round and I woke up remorseful, hungover, regretting everything, short with my family, snapping at my kids, showing me dog off. Get away. Same argument, same people, same place, same work, every day. Clashing. And yet my drinking carried on. There were a couple of times where I think the best I ever had was sort of 6 months sobriety. And I remember thinking at 6 months sober, I still had a lot of mental stuff going on up here. And when I say mental stuff up here, I'm not talking trauma and things like that from stuff that had happened to me. Things they weren't working right up there, you know. I felt different to how normal people act and live in society. And I remember at 6 months sober making the decision that I know what I need to do. Still got this obsession to get somewhere, to get some relief from the feelings that I was feeling inside. And I decided that if I got some prescribed medication, which were diazepam, if I got some diazepam, it'd take the edge off of the way that I was feeling in life, and I could continue living life sober, but with the use of diazepam. Excuse me. Stranger things come. There's nothing stranger than me. So I got these diazepam off of the streets, and I popped a few, and I popped a few more, and I popped a few more, and I changed the way that I felt inside. But I'd also changed how I felt inside, and I decided that if I'd had tablets, I might as well go and get a bottle of vodka. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, on my way to work, I went into Sainsbury's, laughing and joking with cashier. "Oh, well, it's not for me, love. 6 in the morning. It's for a birthday later today." Do you know, and I bet you could have seen truth in my eyes, like you can see truth in my eyes today. And I went out into the car park and I peeled it open and I poured it into my work cup in my van. And I drove round in that van at work all day long, sniffing cocaine and drinking vodka, without a single thought for another being on this planet. All I wanted to do was change the way that I felt inside. And that was the start of my last spree. But the places it's taken me and the things that I've done in drink and drugs shocked me, shocked other people around me. They left my family baffled, my children baffled. And I think what a lot of people fail to see is that I may have looked like the one that was suffering, but my family was suffering more. And I could never see it. I could never see it. I was jealous of the attention my dog got. Do you know, that dog didn't have to go out and earn a living. He didn't have to go out and fix a fence. He didn't have to go out and pump a tyre up on a car. Yet everybody loved it freely. And that's the kind of stupid, immature, pathetic thinking that was going on inside my mind. I felt anger towards my pet because people loved it and it didn't have to do anything to earn that love. So I was a transactional guy, do you know, and I was always trying to earn people's love and respect. I was always trying to please people. I remember walking out of this house one night, and I left in my slippers after an argument with my partner, and I pushed her out of the way. And I walked off in my shorts and slippers, and it was another cold night in winter. And I was on cocaine and I was drinking. And people were out looking for me. My parents were out looking for me, and they're disabled, they're not well, they weren't fit enough to be out worrying and looking for the sun. My brother were out looking for me. My sister and her husband, they were out looking for me. My best friend and his brother, they were out looking for me. And I did 'em myself in corner of a park. Nowhere spectacular. The neon lights had gone now. You know, the club scenes, the pub scenes. I'd dwindled myself out of that and isolated myself to home drinking, and then isolated myself to fucking bush drinking. Because alcohol had become so important to me and drugs had become so important to me, I would fucking run away so that nobody could take it away from me. And I remember that night after, I sensed the search party had ceased and they were all resigned to the fact that I wasn't coming home. And I walked on a little bit further down this lane into this abandoned derelict building. And the next thing I remember coming to, after a couple of bottles of rum and over £1,000 worth of cocaine I'd consumed that day, I came to, and how I'd not frozen to death, I'll never know. And I walked home, and I remember that morning walking home, and I got back to this house here, and my partner opened the door, and she'd been up all night pacing up and down our living room, waiting for Daddy coming back. Kids are asking, when's Dad coming back? He's just at work, love, he's just at work, he'll be back soon. But they knew, they're not daft. And I remember this woman opened the door, my partner, and she was just dead. She was just empty. My drinking and actions over years had just drained her of everything spiritually and mentally. And I followed her into the house, and I've got a chair just behind me. It was there the day that I was sat in it. It's still there today. And she sat on worktop and she says, "Why have you done it again, Eddie?" And I remember sitting there trying to think of a good enough excuse to give her, but I couldn't think of one. I thought I said, if your boss treated you like my boss treated me, and you know, if so-and-so did this and so-and-so did that, and if this had have happened to you, then... But none of them really warranted what I'd done. And I remember sort of going a couple of days without drink and sort of drying out a little bit and going a couple of days without drink before I were off again. I know I might get my timeline mixed up a little bit. I'm sure somebody that witnessed everything that were going on sober might sort of pull me up on dates and times, because I'm not best with them even today. But I were off again, and this is that day when I've filled my drinks flask in my works van full of vodka. I'm driving round at work drinking vodka and consuming cocaine and taking diazepam. And I remember saying, my partner thought, we're going to be home at normal time at 4 o'clock, and then 5 o'clock came and 6 o'clock came and 7 o'clock came, and I told her that the tyre had gone down on van and I'm waiting for a repair company. And then she went, "Where's this repair company? Send us a video, FaceTime me, show it to me. Can we help? Can we get somebody out there?" "Oh, no, it's all right, I've got it sorted now, I'm on my way." And I remember my van running out of fuel, and I was just coming off of a main motorway. Been drinking vodka all day and cocaine, and I pulled off onto a side road, and I pulled up at the side of this dual carriageway, and I rung my partner, and there were blue lights coming, and I said, "It's all over, it's all over. I'm gonna get locked up now." And these blue lights passed. They weren't for me. And she said, "Where are you? We're coming for you." And she got my kids in car, middle of the night. Kids at that time were full of flu. They'd really been through mill with flu bugs and all sorts of nasties that kids of that age get. And they came out down this dark lane to pick me up, scared and concerned, and I got in the car, bawling my eyes out, arguing with my partner. And I came home, and my mum and dad were at my house, and my best friend had come round, and my wife, my soon-to-be wife, or future wife, I mean, she was soon to be leaving me at that point. Everybody was stood there, and I was telling everybody how sorry I was and how I wanted to change, but I couldn't change, and I'm disgusting, and she'd be better off leaving me, you'd all be better off walking away from me. And I think, if I'm honest with you, I think it were getting to a point where those people that loved me the most were just about getting to that point where they were going to have to step back, because they couldn't handle watching me destroy myself the way that I was. And that night I went to bed, and I was kind of hallucinating. I could see cockroaches on walls and on me and stuff like that. You know, I was coming down off these drugs and drink, and I was sweating it out in a single bed on my own. I didn't get much sleep at all that night, and I had to go to work the next day. And I had to speak to my best friend the next day, and I had to speak to my brother and my mother and my partner. And I remember coming home and my partner saying, "That's it." She says, "There's no more now. It's got to stop." And that night I'd gone off on that spree and spent money on drink. I'd stolen the money that we'd saved for our kids' Christmas presents. I'd stolen every penny of it, and I spent it on drugs and drink. And I'd left us right before Christmas, 5th of December. I'd left us with not a pot to piss in. And she said, "I'm done." Do you know what I mean? "I'm done." She says, "These kids have been so ill. I've been so ill," meaning her. She says, "We're done with it." She says, "We're having a normal night for the sake of those children. We're having a normal night. We're going to pretend everything's okay. And then we're going to look at separating. And faced with that, faced with losing the woman that I loved the most in the world, and the children that I loved with all my heart, and even though these episodes of horrendous drinking and horrendous behaviour were happening, there were still periods of a good dad beneath it all. There were still moments of happiness in between the misery. But on that night, faced with losing my partner, losing my children, losing my house, losing my home, potentially losing my job, potentially losing my best friend, potentially losing contact with my family because of my behaviour, the best thing I could think about doing was ripping the blind down, which were covering the window, jumping out and running and getting a bottle of vodka. And that thought terrified me. That thought terrified me. That everything in life that I thought were worth living for were about to leave me, and still yet I wanted to get to alcohol over it all. Now before this, I'd been to services, certain services that offer support and help to drinkers and drug addicts. And I remember going to one service, which I won't mention, but it will serve a purpose to some people. It was, I'd spoken to my doctor. No, I was honest with my doctors. I said, I've got a problem with alcohol, problem with problem with alcohol, problem with drugs, and a problem with prescription drugs. Never get a prescription again off my doctor now. And my doctor referred me to an external service to go and have a weekly checkup, and decided to put me on sertraline as an antidepressant. So I'd gone to the doctor with an issue of a drug problem, a drink problem, and this chaotic lifestyle living. And the solution that my doctor gave me was take antidepressants and go see this external service. So I started to get onto antidepressants. And anybody who is aware of what it's like to get on and off of sertraline will know that it's not an easy process, and it can hinder the process of somebody who's drinking. So I've gone to this drinking service. This were actually earlier in my sobriety. I'd built up a bit of sobriety through this drinking service, and I had to go have a once a week meeting with a woman in an office. And first time I got there, she said, if you'd like to take a seat, sit round the table. And I didn't know which way around the table to walk. That's how scattered my mind was. I thought, do I go left, do I go right, do I walk past her? Am I allowed to walk past her? And I sat down and she explained that I'd have a weekly visit where I'd give a urine sample and that I'd prove that I'd not been taking drugs. And after 4 consecutive weeks of not taking drugs or drink, but one opiate showing up in a sample, which I had reason for, they discharged me. You're sound, you're fixed, go out there, live a normal life. And later on I started drinking again. And at the end of the drinking sprees, when the drinking stopped, the first thing that I did went to, this was while I was still drinking actually. I went to a service it was a counselling service. Now again, I am not doing this video to bring any negative shadows or shame over counselling services. They serve a purpose to people that require this kind of cognitive, neurological kind of help. But I was an alcoholic. I had a problem with alcohol and drugs. And this service were trying to find a solution for that by following sort of mental cognitive patterns and behaviours, and they thought I had repressed childhood trauma, and certainly something that I'm carrying through life is making me drink. Anyway, when I were on that sofa that night thinking about ripping blind down and leaving my family and running out and stealing a bottle of vodka and doing one off into darkness again, I finally picked up my phone and I put the best help for alcohol problem with drink. And it came up with a fellowship that I could go to that were quite local to me. And I remember going, I said to my partner, I'm going to have to go to this place and see if these people can help me. And she says, you're not going anywhere, do you know? Every time I left this house, I didn't come back. Do you know, every time I came back to this house, you were hiding expensive things. Do you know, she was grabbing a purse and handbag because she didn't know if I were going to take money again. And I said, I'm going to have to go to this service. I need to go to this service and I'll be back at 9 o'clock. And I drove to this place where this service is offered from. And I remember standing outside looking in, and I thought I knew everything. I thought I was bigger than anybody, and I had this big ego and this big sort of I am and bullshit attitude, and I daren't walk into this place. I daren't walk into this place and say that I've got a problem. And I remember walking past once or twice, and on third pass, a guy shouted over, he said, "Hey mate, are you looking for this fellowship?" And I said, I am, yeah. Everything inside me wanted to say no, and I just went, I am, yeah. And he said, come on in, I'll get you a cup of tea. And I remember going off up and in and sitting down. I was listening to this guy and he was chatting about God and he was talking about this, and I'm thinking, fuck, this isn't for me. This is not for me. And after he finished speaking, I thought, I'll get up, I'll go to the toilet and I'll piss off. It's not for me. It's not, this isn't the problem. I'll fix this. Even though I'm about to lose my wife and kids, I'm about to probably lose my job, I thought, I'll fix this. And then a few people started to speak in the room, and I started to see identification in what people were saying. Started to hear about where they hid the bottles of vodka or the bottles of whiskey. Started to hear about what they did with the bank accounts and manipulating the wives with money and making a little extra buck on an extra job here and keeping a little stash to one side. And I thought, you sneaky bastards, you've been living kind of lifestyle I'd lived. Do you know, but I still sat in that room thinking that I was better than every single person in there. I used to think I was better than every single person in there. I had this sort of God complex, you know, I'd piss off round back of a church and I'd be drinking whiskey, and it'd be early hours at morning, and morning had come, sun had come up, and I'd see congregation coming in and I'd think, oh, look at the state of you, all prim and proper on a Sunday morning, do you know. Never ever did I ever look at this, what my actions and behaviours were showing. But this room, these guys in this room had captured me. I could see my thinking in their talking, you know, and they could see their thinking in my talking, and they said, it sounds like you're one of us, mate, you know, you need to sort of get help with this. And on the 5th of December 2021, I took my last drink of alcohol, and I have never touched a drop since. Today marks 1,691 days sober, and that's not through anything I've done spectacularly. There is no glory coming to me for that. More glory goes to the man that guided me through the 12-step program that I took. More glory goes to the God that saved me from my own sin. More glory goes to the people that supported me, my family members, friends, people that forgave me for my actions. None of it is on me. And I worked, about 6 months into sobriety, I got to this point of, and I'd been at it before, you know, I was there before that time when I said that I chose to start taking prescribed medications, diazepam. I thought, I can't live sober, I've got to get some diazepam to help me. And I got to that point again, sober, and I'm in sobriety, and I'm attending this fellowship, and I got to a jumping off point. I thought, I can't, and I've learnt enough about alcoholism that I can't safely drink. but I've not done anything about it in order to stay sober. And I remember being at this sort of jumping off point where I thought, I'm fucking done with it all. I was so exhausted. I was still subliminally people pleasing. I was still despising myself. I was still thinking that I was some sort of fucking god, paradoxically, and it were exhausting, it really was. I'd been through the stage of getting clean and getting trainers and getting gym memberships and splashing a bit of cash that I had free that used to go on booze and coke, and very quickly the shiny shit, the material shit, it didn't bear no fucking weight with me anymore. Try not to swear as well today, but it caught me out there, I do apologise. But it didn't bear no weight with me anymore. I was done with it. There was something broken inside, in here and in here. And a guy, I was at a meeting and I shared very openly, and I said I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And a guy who travelled up from south of England, some miracle had put him in the same meeting that I were in that night. He says, I need to take you through this work. I need to take you through the 12 steps. And he did. And he started to take me through the steps, the 12-step program of recovery. And it's that 12-step program of recovery that absolutely revolutionised my life. It turned the negatives into positives. It led me to a power greater than myself that would fix the problem that was in me. Do you know, I used to live with a deep void within inside me. I used to live with this emptiness that alcohol and fatty foods and lustful desires and all sorts of different things I used to plug this hole with to try and make myself feel better. And the one thing it was that I was missing was God. And a connection to a higher power. Now, I didn't understand any of it. I didn't understand a single bit of it. The guy that was guiding me through work at that time said, you're powerless over alcohol, Eddie, because every single time you drink, you think you can do it safely. So you're insane, basically. And I remember feeling offended. Me, insane? I'm not insane. Do you know, I earn this much money a year. Do you know, could not see the fact that I'm pinching it all off my wife and kids to go stick up my nose and down my neck. He says, you've got this subtle insanity that precedes the first drink. He says, that's what we need. We need you restoring to sanity. I accepted that I was powerless over alcohol and that my life were unmanageable, because if it weren't for my partner paying bills and answering the red letters saying that this is a final demand and if we don't hear anything soon, we're going to be cutting your gas off, your electric off, you know, I would have lost everything. My life was unmanageable. Step 2 asked me to be restored to sanity, and my sponsor clearly pointed out and broke it down to me. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that was me practicing with alcohol. Every single time I took a drink, I expected it would be different this time. Even though hundreds of experiences before that all led to the same kind of disaster, I still thought it was going to be different. He said that I had this obsession to control and enjoy the amount that I take. And that's true. I looking at it now, looking back, it's true. I never really went out there to get wankered. Excuse my French, I've done it again, my apologies. But I never actually went out there to get absolutely blottoed. It always started off with this kind of thinking. I might get a box of beer on my own tonight. And then I'd think, no, I can't. It'll cause trouble at home. I can't drink at home. A couple of hours later, I'd be thinking, well, what about 4 cans? And then I'd think, no, it's still too much. If I went home with 4 cans, it'd cause trouble. And a couple of hours later, it'd be, Well, why don't you just get 2 pint cans and drive home with them? Have them on your way home, and then when you get home, stick a chewing gum in your sound. And I'd think, that's a good idea. So every single time I took a drink, I drank based on a lie. Because I believed that if I just had 2, that'd have been enough. But the problem goes further than that. I have an allergy to alcohol. People laugh at this. People, when I'm in pubs and bars and stuff like that, do any allergies, sir? I say, yeah, I'm allergic to alcohol. You're allergic to alcohol? People are stunned by it, do you know what I mean? You can be allergic to lactose, allergic to cheese, allergic to gluten, allergic to this. You'll tell somebody you're allergic to alcohol. But I am. I'm allergic to alcohol because whenever I stick any alcohol into my body whatsoever, it makes me crave another drink. And that's the manifestation of the allergy. Like somebody that's got itchy, watery eyes has hay fever. Pollen gets into their eye, causes them to itch and water. If alcohol gets into my body, it causes me to crave another. So I have this idea that, yeah, I'll just have 1 or 2. Brilliant idea, Eddie. Yeah, that sounds good, mate. We can't see what's gone off in the past. I can't remember this stuff that's happened before. And I take a drink based on a lie that I can just have a couple, and then I can't stop drinking once I've started. Do you know? And there were loads of times throughout my drinking career where my partner would say to me, "Can't you just have 1 or 2 and drive?" And I'd say 1 or 2, I'd rather not. And I would just stick to Coke and I mean Coca-Cola at that point. But it was because I knew if I had 1 or 2 drinks, I wouldn't have stopped. It'd have made me feel that irritated inside to get to more that I'd rather just not bother having any. And then he said, "You've placed yourself beyond human age. You're insane." He said, "We've got to turn our thoughts over to the care of God as we understand Him." Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And at that point there, I thought we're going to hit a hurdle. And I remember him saying to me, "Do you believe in God?" And I said, "Nah." I said, "You make your own luck in this life and you live and die, and when you die it's all black." And I'd had some certain spiritual beliefs previously, but never really had this idea of God. And he questioned me a few questions. He says, "Can I ask you a question, Eddie?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Have you ever prayed to God when something bad's been going on in your life?" And I said, "Yeah, I have." And I remember praying to God when I were in hospital with my daughter. And I remember praying to God and thinking to myself, take this out of her and I'll stop drinking. And he said to me, "You do believe in God, Eddie, you've just got a bad relationship with him." But he went one further than that. He said, and I've shared this on my TikTok channel, so if you've come over from TikTok, you've probably heard this a couple of times, but he said, "If I placed you on a beach, where's your favourite beach destination?" And I said, "It's Whitby." And he said, "Right, I'll put you on beach at Whitby." He said, "And it's high tide. Tide's going to start coming in." He said, "I want you to stop that tide coming in." And I started to think about getting a big excavator. I started to think about digging this really big hole and thinking seal go into the hole, and he just went, "Stop it." He went, "Stop it, Eddie." He said, "That hole will fill up and tide will keep coming in, won't it?" And for the first time in my life, I realised that there were a power out there greater than what I was. But he went further still. He said, "Do us a favour, Eddie." He says, "It's going to rain where I live tomorrow." He says, "Get that rain to stop raining over where I'm working for me, won't you?" And I thought, well, I can't. I want another power. Weather systems. I can't control them. And he says, "Do me one better than that, Ed." He says, "Why don't you try and stop sun from rising tomorrow?" And that were another power greater than myself that I could not control, but that I could turn my will and life over to the care of. Now at the minute, my will and my life is in my hands, and I think it's safe to drink, so they're in the hands of a lunatic. So if I turn my will and my life over to a fucking table leg, it's in better hands than it is in my hands. Do you know? So I took step 3. I turned my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him, a higher power. And I moved on into step 4, which is a personal inventory, where it's a very admin heavy step of writing down everything I've ever done wrong in life, the people that I've hurt, the people that I'm resentful of, the people that have caused me to be angry, frustrated. I did a sex inventory. I did a resentment inventory. And I did a harms list. And I wrote all this stuff down on paper. And I remember, for the first time in my life, I got to see me in black and white, and I realised how much of a disgusting person I'd become. Somewhere within the makeup of me was a decent man. Somewhere within the makeup of me was the person that my parents wanted me to be. But somewhere in life along the way I lost focus. And I'd become this manipulative, argumentative, egotistical, cocky, bullshit kind of person. I were a people pleaser. I could be smiling into your face while I had 20 quid between my fingers in your purse. Do you know? Lying to people about everything and anything to just get what I wanted. And I saw it in black and white, and I remember thinking to myself at that moment, God, I want you to come into my life and take all of this away. And I felt for the first time the loving presence of my Creator descend upon me. And it is a feeling that I cannot explain to you, other than the fact that I felt at peace. I felt absolutely surrounded by love. And the 5th step is to admit everything that we've ever done wrong to another human being. And I spent a couple of hours on a Zoom call to this guy that were guiding me through work, and I told him absolutely everything I've ever done wrong, and I confessed it all to him, and I did it fearlessly. There were a little bit of fear surrounding it, but at the end of it, the guy that were taking me through the work looked at me square in the eye and he said, I love you, son. He still calls me son today, and it's so endearing, it's unbelievable. But he said, I love you, son. He said, you've done well there. He said, and only people that want to change will do that kind of thing. And I did so desperately want it. I did so desperately want it. Step 6 and 7 are to ask God to remove all our defects of character and our shortcomings. And like I couldn't get rid of my drink problem. I tried to go to counselling. I tried to go to a service in Leeds. I tried to read excuse me, I swore again. I tried to read inspirational magazines and watch inspirational movies and watch inspirational TikToks and YouTubes and all sorts, but I couldn't get myself sober. And I realised that I had this list of defects, these things that I've stored up throughout my life to protect me and to we often hear lots of these things shared in quite a harmless way, but in another way it does kind of harm others, if he hits you, hit him back, And that led me into a defect of character where if somebody wrongs you, you wrong them back, And I asked God to humbly remove all those, and I was willing to let him take them all away. Steps 8 and 9 helped me make a list of these people that I had harmed, and it helped me become willing to make amends to them all. And step 9 will go out and make direct amends to each person that I still have ongoing today, there will be people out there that I've not made amends to, that I am unwilling to make amends to when the time's brought to me. And steps 10, 11 and 12 are to continue to take personal inventory upon my actions and behaviours today. So whenever I'm wrong, promptly admitting it. Step 11 is to continue to read through prayer and meditation in order to maintain a conscious contact with the God of my understanding. And step 12 is to carry this message to other people and to help other people wherever possible. And in my journey of recovery, I have been blessed in the fact that I've been able to carry this message inside prisons. I've been able to carry this message to conventions of alcoholics up and down the country. I've been blessed in the fact that I get to work with people one-on-one and help them with their issue. I've been blessed with the fact that every single time an opportunity presents itself for me to stay sober, it helps me stay sober, one day at a time. Do you know, there's a different life today that I live. I remember my mother-in-law, she called me one day at a gathering. I'd been sober maybe 12 months, and she called me, she said, "I want a word with you." And I was like, "Do you really? What have I done wrong? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?" And she was like, "No, come here." And she pulled me off into one side. And she said, "There's something different about you." And I said, "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" And she went, "No, it's a good thing." She said, "There's something different about you." And I said, "Well, thank you for saying that." But deep down inside myself, I knew what it was. It was God. It was being guided by a different will. I'd surrendered my will. I'd quit trying to run the show on this life. I quit trying to direct people and tell them what they were doing. I quit being egotistical. I suffer with the human condition. Do you know what I mean? I am a human being, and I ain't ever going to lie to you and say that I ain't ever going to flip somebody them going up a motorway one day, because it's highly likely to happen. It is highly likely to happen, but there's a good chance I'm going to do a step 10 shortly after it. There's a good chance that if I ever see that person again, I will apologise to them, make amends to them where I've harmed them. And it helps me live a much better life today. So that's been me. That's my that is my story, in all its glory and all its honesty. And do I live with regrets today? No, I don't live with a single regret. Sometimes I do feel a little bit remorse and I feel a little bit of regret, but very quickly I'm reminded that in actual fact, the problem that I had with drink and drugs has led me to the person that I am today. They are my biggest teachers. And if there's anything that I can sort of say to anybody that's living with somebody that's addicted to something or somebody that's an alcoholic, is that they too may also be going through the biggest lesson they might ever need to learn and be thrust out into a completely different way of living if they are willing to have it. But we don't force it on anybody. We stand with our hand out, and if you reach out to it, you can take it. And if you don't want to, you don't have to. But today, the life that I've got, the relationship that I have with my children, you know, back in my drinking days, I were a fast pace. I'll take you rock climbing, take you paddle boarding, take you here, take you there, jungle gyms and one thing and another. I'd buy American candies and I'd walk through my front door and I'd say, "Love me." Because I had the things in my hands that would make them love me. But you see, when those kids fell over and they cut the knee, I didn't know how to react to it. I'd say, "Get up. It's not bad. Stop crying." I'm not perfect today, but when them girls fall over and they hurt themselves, I can be there for them in the sense that I can hold them, I can care for them, I can nurture them, I can protect them. Like God protects me, and it runs through me into other people. We have undoubtedly, without a shadow of a doubt, we've healed as a family. Not only as a direct family, but that healing's run out into our further family. Do you know? Since getting sober back in 2021, the amount of friends and acquaintances that I've made over those 4.5 years, the amount of organisations that I'm connected to, the amount of people that want to know me for me, and the fact that I have an interest in them today baffles me. Do you know, last night I was sat in a Bible study. Sunday morning I'll be attending Mass at my church. And this is a guy that used to sit at the back of it judging everybody that's gone in, so tell me that's not a miracle. Something profound has happened on a deep, spiritual and an effective basis there. And I'm blessed that that's happened in me. So I'm going to wrap that up. That's my story from start to finish. And if you get anything from that, I hope it helps. If there's anything you'd like to share back, reach out, you know. In terms of anonymity, I'm not releasing my full name, and if you know me by my full name, I'd ask that you don't use my full name in response to any of the video or any contact up on this page. And I've protected the fellowship that helped me the most. But if you need help with drink, type into your phone fellowships that help with a drink problem. If you need help with narcotics, type into your phone help from fellowships for people with problems with narcotics. And I promise, if you'll just reach out halfway, somebody will meet you halfway. And then they'll guide you so lovingly through the process that I were guided through, into a life beyond your wildest dreams. And that's not sports cars and mansions. It's just being able to sit in peace and in quiet in your own company and not worried what your brain's going to come at you with. That's a miracle. So God bless to you all. We're going to explore the 12 steps on this page. The 12 steps are a tool that are out there in the public domain that can be discussed freely. Certain parts of certain fellowships are bound by anonymity, and I will respect that at all cost. But as for speaking about the steps, I'll answer questions upon that, but I will sort of expand on that in coming videos. And let's, we can get sort of one-on-one interviews as well, and we can look at all sorts of different content that can go on here. I've also got a TikTok account as well, which is much shorter, snappier videos that are also quite helpful, so scoot on over there, see what that's about. But until then, God bless to you all.